Well, and the other witness that you called was Wade Robson,
Yes.
who ultimately was one of the two people who did Leaving Neverland. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But in this case, Wade Robson took the stand to say that Michael Jackson never did anything improper.
Wade Robson was my first witness.
Hmm.
And as I said before, if you're putting on a defense case, you want to start strong, you want to end strong. We started with Wade Robson, we ended with Chris Tucker. Macaulay Culkin was our second witness. I met with Wade, I met with his mother, I met with his sister. I called all three of them as witnesses. And Wade was adamant to me that he was never touched, that he was never violated, that these allegations were nonsense. Because remember, they put on some witnesses to say Wade was molested,
Right.
that they saw it. And he was such a strong witness for us, such a strong defender and supporter of Michael Jackson, that I made him our first witness. But I also called his mother and his sister, who had traveled with Wade and Michael on some of these tours. And they testified they never saw anything bad happen or anything wrong happen. And I mean, the three of them could not have been stronger advocates for Michael Jackson. So when I heard about this movie, Leaving Neverland, I was stunned, absolutely stunned, because he talked to me. He was adamant he was never touched. I called him as my witness. He testified under oath he was never touched. And then a very, very good prosecutor, Ron Zonin, terrific prosecutor and a vicious cross-examiner, went after him tooth and nail, and he never budged. He said, it's ridiculous. He never did anything like this to me.
Well, like you said,
words to that effect.
Yeah. Well, like you said, the trial lasted from January to June 2005. And at the end, Michael Jackson was acquitted on all 14 charges.
10 felonies and 4 misdemeanors.
Yeah.
They didn't get him on anything. In fact, just so you know, he was indicted by a grand jury for 10 felony counts. At the end of the trial, as it was going to the jury, the judge said he's going to give the jury some options on the last 4 felony counts. If they acquit him of any of those last 4 felony counts, I'm going to give them the option of convicting of a misdemeanor. So they had to say guilty or not guilty 14 times, 10 felonies, 4 misdemeanor options. They said not guilty, all felonies, not guilty, all misdemeanors, not guilty, anything.
Sitting next to Michael Jackson, what was his reaction when he heard that news?
You know, he came in the courtroom that day. His cheeks were sunken in. He looked frozen with fear. He just was weakened. You could just see it in his eyes, see it in the way he carried himself. I think he was terrified with fear. I think a lot of people had said to him, the media says you're going to be convicted. I happen to know some people told him he was going to be convicted. And they were trying to cheer him up that there'll be an appeal and all this. I never said that to him. We went into the courtroom. We sat down. The media was packed in the courtroom and outside the courtroom. In fact, this particular trial had over 2,200 accredited media, which is more accredited media than O.J. Simpson and Scott Peterson combined. That's how big this trial was around the world. So the media is every place. They set up tents everywhere around the courthouse. There was a buildup to the verdict. You know, he had an entourage, some limousines with security, et cetera. They were on their way to the courthouse. All the major airwaves they were following this caravan of limos to the courthouse. He stops in front of the courthouse. He comes out of the car with his entourage. I meet him there. We go into the courtroom. Courtroom fills up. The judge comes out, asks for silence. He then brings the jurors out. They fill the jury box. The foreman of the jury hands the verdict forms to the bailiff, who hands the verdict forms to the judge, who looks them over and then asks the jurors, this your verdict? And the foreman says yes. And then the court clerk, at the judge's request, reads the verdicts, one count after another. And when the last not guilty came down, I said to Michael, you're free. And he said, thank you, thank you, thank you. We hugged. All the defense team hugged, and then we left the courthouse.
Well, you said that the prosecution is a travesty of justice and one of the most mean-spirited attacks on an innocent person in legal history.
That's how I feel about that case.
Yeah.
I think the way the prosecution constructed this case, the way they charged this case, the way they presented the case was an absolute travesty of justice. It was almost as if psychologically, because they were going after someone who was innocent, they went overboard trying to demonize and monsterize the defendant. As I've said earlier, I mean, how do you possibly charge Michael Jackson like he's a mafia chieftain, masterminding a criminal conspiracy of various individuals to falsely imprison a family and abduct children? How do you even come up with that idea?
Right.
I think they did it because they felt we have to go overboard to have a chance of getting him. And fortunately, they failed.
Can you say how much you were paid to defend him?
No, I can't. That's private.
I'm sure it was quite a bit, though.